Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world today. And welcome to today's HDI webcast, How Remote Control Technology is Continuing to Improve Support and Bring Value to Organizations, brought to you by LogMeIn. I'm Roy Atkinson, and I'll be your moderator today. We have a few housekeeping details before we begin. If you experience any difficulty with the webinar itself, you can get help by clicking on the green question mark at the bottom of your screen. You can participate in the Q&A session by asking questions at any time during the webcast. Click on the red QA button and just type your question into the Ask a Question text area below the video window and then click Submit. At this time, we recommend that you disable any pop-up blockers on your browser because there will be pop-up windows. To chat with others who are attending today, click on the group chat button at the bottom right of your screen. We love having you exchange ideas during the webinar. The slides will advance automatically throughout the event. You can download a copy of the slides by clicking on the Download Slides button located below the presentation window. If you are experiencing any technical problems, please visit the Help Guide by clicking on the Help link. In addition, you can contact our technical support helpline, which is located in the webcast Help Guide. You can contact us on Twitter, or follow along at the hashtag ThinkHDI. Our main account is at ThinkHDI, always sending out information and exchanging ideas with you. We're on Facebook. We are on LinkedIn. And, of course, hdiconnect.com, where you can read a blog, ask a question, or find a solution in our buyer's guide. Before we get started with the featured presentations today, we have a poll question for you. Is your company or organization currently using a remote control solution? And you'll only be able to select one, whether you do have one, you don't have one, you're considering adding it, or you're not sure. So if you select one of those and click Submit Answer, we'll just give you a few seconds to respond. And then we'll find out how you're doing. Okay. So it looks like most of you have a remote control solution in place at this time. That is as expected, over 87% of you. As we've discovered in HDI research, remote control is an extremely important part of today's support centers. About 43% of organizations are resolving more than half their tickets through remote control tools. And that's up from 39% in 2013 and 34% in 2012. So as you can see, the importance of remote control continues to increase. And just about half, a little less than half, 47% of support centers consider remote control a must-have technology, right up there with incident management and knowledge management. Extremely important technology. Our webcast today is sponsored by LogMeIn. Thank you for your support, LogMeIn. That enables us to bring in these webcasts free of charge. And representing our sponsor today is Peter Zainu, Director of Products for LogMeIn Rescue. Take it away, Peter.
Thanks, Roy. So I wanted to tell you guys a little bit about LogMeIn before we go ahead and get started. So for those of you who don't know, LogMeIn is a public company with revenues north of $200 million. We're one of only 4 cloud vendors with over 20% growth in revenue and earnings per share. And we're a market leader in the vision of IoT with a mission to simply connect everything. We have over 50 million active users and over 500,000 customers with operations worldwide, and now over 800 employees in 6 global offices. Our couple sample customers that we have up on the screen, I mean, it runs from the who's who of the Fortune 500 all the way into some of the more famous startups and technical companies that are out there, scaling from all the way from the small to the largest companies in the world. Our suite of products really run the gamut from connectivity and like we mentioned before, we aim to connect everybody and anything, starting from our customer engagement cloud where we can chat with customers or provide remote support assistance, all the way through collaboration and our Join Me product, to the connected object cloud and Xively, and our more stereotypical IT management products that we have from AppGuru, Central, and Cubby, all the way to some new acquisitions like Meldium. We empower organizations to connect simply with customers and employees in these different ways. The main product we talk about today, and that's more relevant for the audience today, is our LogMeIn and Rescue application. It's our powerful remote support application, putting the power right at your agent's fingertips, available anytime, anywhere through our cloud-based solution. It's an intuitive and innovative user interface, making it easy for the technicians to control and to resolve problems simply and powerfully. And it's an enterprise-grade built on an enterprise-grade cloud platform, meaning if you're an agent, a single agent, or if you have 5,000 agents, the same product can scale and fit all the needs of your help desk. We look forward to the webinar today, and I hand it back on over to you, Roy.
Thanks, Peter. We're really great to have you aboard as a sponsor. And we're going to move along to the featured webcast now. And we are fortunate to have with us today Willette Glenn, Senior Service Desk Manager for PepsiCo. The PepsiCo Support Center serves both the U.S. and Canada, comprises over 100 analysts, and averages more than 600,000 interactions per year. So it's a sizable operation, and we're going to learn more about how they do things at PepsiCo. So take it away, Willette.
Thank you, Roy. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining the webinar today, How Remote Control Technology is Continuing to Improve Support and Bring Value to Organizations. I am Willette Glenn, and I'm the Senior Manager for the PepsiCo Support Center. A little bit about me. I've been working in the IT sector for PepsiCo for the last 17 years. Prior to joining the PepsiCo Support Center, or what we like to call the PSC, I worked in development and engineering, and I've been at the PepsiCo Support Center for the last 2 years. The Support Center has used remote control for at least the last 8 years. Though the vendor and the versions have changed over the years, remote control still remains one of the most necessary technologies that we have for support. So as Roy mentioned, a little bit about our desk. We are comprised of approximately 100 agents, and we have a couple of desks. One within the North America area and here in Plano, and then our other desk is in Canada. Our 100 agent number kind of fluctuates throughout the year, and it's based on the number of projects that are onboarded and special efforts like yearly open enrollment. And then we have a group that is responsible for onboarding things. That's our project coordinator group. It's comprised of 3 people that partner with our backline teams to ensure proper onboarding and documentation exists prior to bringing on support for the service desk. We have a director, 5 other service desk managers. We have 5 tech coaches. We have a reporting coordinator. We have 2 analysts that are our training and development team. We have a knowledge coordinator, 3 knowledge engineers. We have newly created automation analysts, and we have 2 of those. So we have a pretty sizable desk. And as Roy said, we take in about 600,000 calls a year. Now, as far as our desk hours of operation, we are a 24/7, 365-day-a-year operation. We receive calls primarily from our 888 PepsiCo phone number and through our web site, 888 PepsiCo. Just like the number, it helps them remember. And they're able to log web tickets from there. We don't today take any other sources of ticketing, like from email or web chat today. So it's just the phone and web tickets that are logged. Now, who uses remote control? A little bit more about our desk and how we're divided out. We have three primary groups of analysts. We have our infrastructure team, we have our business applications team, and we have our password reset team. Now, within those three big buckets, we are broken out into smaller teams that support different applications within those. But for the most part, it's three big buckets of support. So with our infrastructure team, they are responsible for the printer support, OS-related issues, email support, installations. And in that group, 50 to 60% of those calls will use remote control. Now, out of all of the calls that our new analysts take, 95% of those calls will use remote control. For our business applications, they support our homegrown or purchased applications that are responsible for running the business. 30 to 40% of every call uses remote control. And if the analyst is a new onboarded analyst, about 60% of those calls will use remote control. Now, as far as our password reset team is concerned, they don't use remote control quite as frequently as the other teams because their primary job is just to reset passwords. So about 10 to 20% of those calls will use remote control. However, if you notice, when the analyst is new, about 50% of those calls will use remote control. Now, the types of scenarios that we've seen here at PepsiCo, we use a various number of scenarios or types of scenarios. We install printers or programs. We grant admin rights, set specific configurations. They can fix domain trust issues. They verify customer steps. They may view error messages and pop-ups that the customer may be calling in about. And there are some occasions when they're responsible for restarting a process or clearing event logs and setting configurations on servers. So our remote control is not just for our workstations and customers. We use remote control pretty frequently on our servers as well. There are times when they may need to troubleshoot an application or possibly walk a customer through how to perform a task. And then it's frequently used in our training of new analysts. Now, some of the benefits that we've seen with remote control, it has had a direct impact on our metrics. Here at the PSC, we are focused on live call answer, our first contact resolution, average speed of answer, and availability, which I'm sure are probably metrics that you guys are looking at as well on your service desk. In addition to those key metrics, we are responsible to make sure that we are reducing the number of callbacks and abandoned calls that we see here at the desk. We use remote control to help us achieve some very impressive numbers last year. In 2014, we observed an increase in availability, which is the time an agent is available to take a call, which directly impacts our live call answer. Our live call answer last year was 93.4%. Our first contact resolution has increased with the use of remote control. The agents are able to see what the customer sees, thereby increasing his or her ability to resolve an issue. And then we've noted a reduction in the time it takes to onboard our new analyst. So it's gotten significantly shorter time to get our new analyst on the floor. So they're usually with us they sit with an analyst, a trainer, for 2 days, and then they're ready to actually start taking calls. We do monitor those calls, but they're ready. And since we have remote control, some of the things that may have been obscure to them are actually a lot clearer because they're able to get to the customer's machine and understand what the customer is calling in about. So it's aided us a ton in our training efforts. We've noted a reduction in the time it takes to clear up misdirected calls as well. So a customer may call in, for example, a customer may call in to the desk and describe a problem. If you were to remote control to that customer's machine, you quickly find that what the customer is explaining and what the actual problem is very different. So it's helped us a lot in reducing misdirected calls and transfers. So here are our numbers from last year. Again, our live call answer was 93.4%. Our first contact resolution was 80.7%, which is very high. Our average speed of answer was 1 minute and 29 seconds, and our availability was 75.2%. We actually set those metrics at the beginning of the year, and we achieved all of our metrics last year, so it was a big celebration for us. Remote control is definitely one of the things that we feel helped us get to those numbers. Now, if you take a look at what we're calling the impact of implementing remote control, what I did was I pulled some numbers over the last 3 years to kind of look at how our metrics have changed over the years. And what you'll notice is that we've actually seen an increase in our metrics, or our metrics have improved year over year since 2012. Now, this is an increase despite things like turnover, new project onboarding, and reductions in staff. And the one thing I can cite that has been different each year is that we find new ways to implement remote control. We find other uses for it every year, and we rely on it more and more to help us achieve our very tight numbers that we get each year. Now, some of the things that we've implemented here at the PepsiCo Support Center is that since we do use remote control so heavily, we actually have automation that's put in place. It's one-click automation that allows our analysts to have one application up that allows them to use remote control as well as other features that you see there. But we have remote assist there. We have remote control in there. And we also have created some remote control to specific banks of servers. You'll see there it says PIC and ICS. And that allows our analysts to use remote control from a one-click feature. And what it does is it accesses our installed remote control software and launches it from here, so they don't have to go into another tool to access or get remote control to work on a server or a workstation. This just, again, lends itself to how much we rely on remote control in our environment to help us out, that we felt like it was important enough to add that to our what we call a Help Me tool. Now, we do periodically add other things here, but what we have in our Help Me tool are those things that we use all of the time. So if it's something that we consistently use, it's here in our Help Me tool, and remote control is one of those consistently used technologies. So one of the things I do want to talk to you guys about is the security concerns. So here at PepsiCo, we're always pretty focused on security and holes in security and making sure that we have all of those things buttoned up for any application or technology that enters our environment. we do what is called here a security assessment. And that's a series of forms and documents that have to be completed and reviewed prior to even purchasing any software. The types of forms or documents that are required for your security assessment really depends upon what it is you're trying to bring into the environment. Something like remote control, there's going to be several assessments that have to take place prior to onboarding new remote control software. So what our security team does is they review the proposed software and expose any possible security vulnerabilities. They ensure that approved protocols are being used. They evaluate the process that will be used with the software and integrations to other tools. So they even look at how will you use this. So it's not just how does the tool work, it's how are you planning to use it. Who will have access to it, and what's the security clearance for those people. In addition, they will evaluate the hardware requirements and perform any assessments. And of course, if the software you're purchasing requires any appliances to be purchased or new appliances in our environment, those would be assessed as well. They take a review and of whatever data is stored or housed externally on vendor-provided hardware. There are some tools that will allow you to remote control if it's vendor-hosted. Some of that information is stored externally. Anything that's stored externally has to be approved. They go through all of the data. They check for any clear text passes of passwords, any information that may be sent, email addresses or IDs that are passed along in the information must be evaluated and approved for the vendor if it's going outside of our company. They also might meet with our vendor engineers to perform more detailed evaluations of the project or the product. So they'll take a look at it. If they see some exposures, they may want to have some additional conversations with the engineers of the product to ensure that everything is zipped up, that we're not exposing anything that we shouldn't be exposing. And then the twofold process of that is we have another team, which is our enterprise architecture team. They review all the software that comes into the environment to prevent duplication of software. So you don't want 4 or 5 different remote control tools in your environment unless there's really a need for that. And so that team manages the versions and what software we have in the environment. They also ensure that non-standard hardware isn't being purchased and we're not bringing in non-standard hardware to keep all of those things standard. So that's how, from a security standpoint, they look at everything that's coming in and they want to understand what exposures something like remote control would have for us. But here at the desk, we have remote control guidelines. So if we're able to get that piece of software or that remote control tool through our security assessment and through our enterprise architecture team, now we're ready to deploy it. We have a list of standards and guidelines that are used at the service desk. And there are things like authorization must be granted by the customer before remote controlling any workstation. So our analysts are not allowed to simply go out to a machine and remote control it without the customer's okay. All of our remote control sessions are logged, so we can go back and find out who accessed a particular machine if we needed to. Never leaving a remote control session unattended. So there are times when our agents might get up to ask a question. So they're sitting there, they may get up to walk over to ask someone else a question about a how-to, or they may need some assistance. They are not allowed to leave their desk unattended with that remote control session open. So if they have a remote control session open, they need to make sure that their machines are locked. If they have to get up and walk away, they are required to notify the customer that they are stepping away, and never leaving that session available for just anyone to walk up and see what may be going on someone else's machine. Remote control is to be used only for assistance and remediation. So they're not to be out on people's machines, browsing around, doing things that they're not supposed to do. It's only for assistance and remediation of issues. By the same token, those same rules apply to our servers. Now, with the servers, you don't have anyone there to authorize your access of it. So we control remote control access to servers through their logins. So you don't even have access to remote control certain machines. And you always use an admin ID. We don't have anyone remote controlling with, say, a generic ID. Every person who has access to remote control has an administrator's ID that they're supposed to use. And they're never to use any other ID for remote control other than their administrator ID. So those are some of the practices that we have in place at the desk to ensure that people are following the right protocols and processes for remote controlling machines and servers. Now, some of the things that we have on the horizon. So today we're able to remote control our servers, various operating systems on our servers, of course, and our workstations. But we are looking at implementing web chat as another form of work intake. The remote control or the web chat functionality that we would like to implement would preferably have remote control capability built in it, if that's possible. We know that it is in some of the software that we've reviewed. This is a big bet for our 2015 initiatives, is to get that web chat along with its version of remote control implemented this year. So that's what we're doing this year. On our wish list, we would love to be able to remote control our iPhone devices and our Android devices, and of course remote support for our Mac OSs. We've noticed that there are lots of tools now that are starting to offer support for phones and Androids, and of course Mac OSs. So we're looking and evaluating all the software that's available today to see if we can get some software that meets our needs for these things, these items that we have on our wish list. Now today what we do to manage those is we have something that we again created in-house, which is called our online virtual hardware lab. And what it really is, it's a series of screenshots that are put out there to aid the analyst in finding and pointing the customer to the right place if they're having to guide someone through it, or being able to see what that iPhone menu looks like if they're not holding an iPhone. So it's pretty manual, and we build a lot of screenshots out there to be able to help with that. But that's what we have today. So you can see where remote control in this space would be a huge benefit to our desk. So that actually concludes the information that I had to present to you. I'm going to turn it back over to Roy.
Great, Willette. Thanks. Thanks for going into so much detail about many of the aspects of your remote control processes. And we do have quite a few questions from folks about some aspects of both what you do and also remote control processes in general. So let's get started with those. We have good amount of time to get through them, but we do have a ton of questions. So one of the questions comes from Michael, and he says, how long is your training period for onboarding a new analyst? You mentioned that new analysts really heavily utilize the remote control system, so maybe you can tell us more about that.
Sure. It depends and varies on which team they're going to as to the true onboarding for our analyst. For our weekend or off-shift teams, they support everything that comes into the desk. So for them, it could truly be a couple of months where they're being trained and onboarded because there's so much to teach them, from password resets to everything that infrastructure does to everything that our business application team does. So the onboarding for our off-shift analyst and weekend folks is usually a couple of months to do everything. But they're taking calls well sooner than that. It's just segregated into what calls they've been trained to take. And we typically start them with our easiest type calls, which is password. So we'll have them taking password calls within a couple of days of getting them in-house. So they come into, everyone comes into our environment. They take a 2-day onboarding class, which teaches them about PepsiCo as a company, and it also teaches them the basics of how to use our CRM tool or ticket logging tool. Once that's completed, they go to, depending on what teams they're going to, if it's password, they'll go sit with our password trainer, or if it's infrastructure, they'll go there. If it's weekend or off shifts, we start them at password as well. And we start them with analysts, and they start taking calls. They will sit with the analyst for a couple of days to learn how to log a ticket, hear some of the questions, and then that switches. The new analyst will start to take calls, and the trainer will listen. So that time to onboard kind of varies, but we have them on the phones after about 2 days.
Great. That's terrific. And just a note that you may notice that the survey for this webcast has launched in your window. If you could fill that out for us, that would be very helpful for future presentations and helps us out greatly in designing the webcast for you. Just going to follow up with a couple of items on that, Willette. You mentioned that your first call or first contact resolution is very high. It's at 80.7%, I think. And you also mentioned that you do manual password resets at the desk. Do you have a ballpark idea of what percentage of your calls or contacts are password reset?
Yes, actually, we receive about 300 to 500 password reset calls a day. So our password reset number is pretty high. I would say it's probably about 30% of all the calls that we take.
Okay, that's interesting because that's about what we see when we survey on password resets. We see 30 to 35%. That seems to be a pretty close industry average, so you're on target there.
We are starting to look at some ways to improve that through automation. There's not a whole lot that you can do about having people remember their passwords, especially for applications that they don't access daily. And so we've been looking into ways to automate password resets so that if the call's coming in, it's at least going to automate the fix for it. We do have automation in place for some of our handheld resets, so they can get a temporary password from our IVR and not actually have to speak to an analyst. So we've done some automation already, but still the number is pretty high.
Thanks. And speaking of handhelds and mobile devices, this question is for Peter, if you're available there, Peter. Carrie wants to know, does LogMeIn Rescue connect to mobile devices like iOS or Android?
That's a great question. Yeah, we do connect to Android and to iOS devices. We fully remote control a strong majority of the Android devices that are available in North America and in Europe. We have direct partnerships with 4 of the major OEM manufacturers, including Samsung, HTC, Motorola, and Sony, meaning all of their new devices and devices that they've been producing since the end of 2013, we're able to connect to and fully remote control those devices. When it comes to iOS, it's a little bit more of a lockdown environment, so no real remote control solution is able to remote control any of the iOS devices, but we can connect to them, remote support them, gather diagnostics from them, share screenshots with a technician, and guide the end users through resolving any issues that they might have with those devices.
Great, thank you, Peter. And just kind of a follow-up, and I think maybe all 3 of us will have a little bit of input here. Are customers open to having remote control of their smartphones? I think it would be suspicious. So if somebody came in and took over the control of your iPhone or your Android device, it might feel a little weird. Is that the case? Do you hear about any of that? Have you talked about that with your customers, Willette, too? You can both respond to that.
Sure. Here at our desk, I think it would be weird if they hadn't initiated a call to us. If someone just takes over your device or your laptop unannounced, that's weird, and that's kind of a creepy thing to happen. Not something that we could do here or would do here. What I found in surveying our customers as far as what they would like to have happen, they would prefer being able to have someone see their iPhone just like their laptops. And because it would get them through the call a lot faster, because our customers feel like their time is valuable, right? And so if they're spending a lot of time trying to explain to the person on the other end of the phone what they're seeing, that's a valuable time. So if that person on the other end could just, hey, log in and look at this and you can see what I'm talking about, they would be very accepting to that. Blind remoting to it would not be something that we would do in our environment.
Great, thank you so much. And this refers back to something that you mentioned earlier too. Scott asked about, do you have an ask the customer? So I think you said that the customer must approve the remote connection before it starts, correct?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. That's best practice from where I sit. And Joanna asks, isn't providing phone and email support good enough? It's a great question, and I chuckle because we struggle with the different channels that we have to provide support through. And maybe, Willette, you can just talk through a little bit about some of the shortcuts that remote control affords you, especially with email support coming in. A lot of times people don't provide enough information in the initial email to you for you to be able to assess the problem and come up with a solution. And I can see how, and from my own experience, I know that remote support contributes greatly to that. If you can get a hold of that person and remote back in, you can see what's going on or assist them to walk through something. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure, it absolutely does. We have a team that's actually dedicated to our web ticketing. So we have a group of 3 analysts, and all they do are web tickets, because the first contact resolution on those drops significantly. When a customer logs a ticket by themselves without the aid of an analyst to kind of ask them the right questions, we get tickets with practically no information in them. They'll say things like, can't log in. Okay. There are, 200 different things you could be logging into. Which one would that be? And so for most of the time, for those web tickets, they have to get a hold of the person before they can do anything with that ticket, right? So it delays it a lot in being able to resolve those quickly. But once they do get a hold of the person, the remote control aspect of that aids them greatly, because we don't always get good descriptions from the customer about what's going on. And you can rest assured that if we got a description that says can't log in, that person's really not sure what they can't log into. They're just knowing that they're supposed to be doing something, and they're not sure. And that happens so frequently that, you know, the customer may be new. They may be new at a job, and they don't know what they should be logging into. They just see something that says, I'm supposed to log in here. Where's here? And so if you're able to see what they're trying to do, you can pull up that knowledge solution. You can walk them through what they need to, you know, be walked through. We do a lot of that here at the desk too, helping them, you know, help themselves. And we wouldn't be able to do that without remote control. Because a lot of times our customers aren't able to express in the web ticket nor on the phone what their real problem is.
That's great. And in my experience, again, too, I saw a lot of that where there was say a shortcut on a particular group of people had access to one program, and it was, for some reason, it showed up on their desktop as the shortcut was named the name of the server as opposed to the name of the program that was running, and that often caused confusion between the person who was sitting at that desktop and somebody at the service desk, because they say, I can't log into my Della. And somebody who wasn't familiar with that would go, what is that? So a lot of times it's great to clarify. And there was a question also about using remote control as a teaching tool. So I know that you said that you don't use remote control except to fix things. But I think in that case, would you consider that doing a little teaching along the way, especially if it is a new user?
Absolutely, we do. They're still remediating something. They're not just remote controlling out to show somebody something. They'll remote control out, and they're teaching the person sitting with them how to resolve an issue or how to do something with an application that a customer is calling in about. And so then that analyst is able to make their own notes. You know, they're able to follow through with the solutions and see exactly, you know, what should be done. Because our knowledge base, we have an extensive knowledge base. We've got probably 20,000 solutions out there, right? Our backline teams are responsible for building those solutions, but they don't always put step-by-step in there. So sometimes there's a step or two missing. And so being able to show that new analyst, hey, I know it says this, and then the next step is this, but oh, by the way, there's this little step right here that's not noted in the solution. The seasoned analyst may know that, but, you know, that's something that our new analysts wouldn't know.
Yeah, it's terrific. And there's a question here. Can you see a positive return on investment from the investment in a remote control solution? And I would think that there's a bunch of ways you might be able to look at that. And I'll throw that question at Peter. Have you seen your LogMeIn customers calculate ROI, and maybe you have some advice on how to do that?
Yeah, we've seen a few different customers calculate the ROI for using remote support tools, especially Rescue, and it varies, you know, very heavily depending on the use cases that you have. If you're using it to support your own employees and your internal help desk, it can be, you know, reduction of staff needs or, you know, increased efficiency. We've seen some customers who actually use it for a handset and mobile device troubleshooting before returns are completed, and they've actually been able to reduce the number of returns that are sent back to them and saved upwards of $7 to $8 million a year just on the calls that use Rescue alone. So there's definitely a positive impact on using Rescue and remote support tools like that in all use cases. And we continuously hear it from customers and run surveys and case studies to see what the positive impacts are.
Great, thank you. There's a question here from Chad. It says, has there been a shift in staffing in some organizations due to remote control technologies, such as moving desktop support people into the service desk or reducing the desktop support team? I'm going to grab that one because one of the things that we have seen in our HDI research is that a lot of organizations have consolidated some of the functions of desktop support and the service desk or support center simply because they can. It is no longer necessary a lot of times to assign a field agent to go and make the trek to somebody's desk in order to resolve something. It can be resolved via remote control a large percentage of the time. The stat that I mentioned at the top of the webcast from our research is that about 43% of organizations are resolving more than half their tickets by remote support. So it doesn't mean that desktop support is necessarily going away. It means that their duties have changed. And in order to accommodate some of that change, some support centers have created what's called level 1.5. So somewhere between level 1 and level 2, level 2 being somebody like desktop where you'd actually send an agent or an analyst out to the desktop. At 1.5, they might be able to handle the technology as well as that desktop support field technician, but would be in the support center and trying to resolve things by remote control before it gets as far as that level 2 field agent. And again, that's a way that return on investment can be realized because you don't have the time of the windshield time or hallway time, whatever it happens to be, when you're assigning field agents to go to a desk side. So that's a great advantage. I know it was for me in my desktop support career. So
I will say that we here at PepsiCo have a 1.5 team. It's comprised of 4 analysts, and it's exactly what Roy just alluded to. If our analyst on the floor can't resolve that, they'll send it to our 1.5 or our extended support team first, and then if the extended support team can't resolve it, then they'll escalate it to a backline team. It cuts your cost per call if you're able to still resolve it here at the desk and not have to engage your backline team. We also retain first contact resolution by using that level 1.5 team.
Great. Yeah, I think that's becoming much more common practice now, and is, I think, in general part of what's called shift left, which is to send more of the technical work down toward the front line and provide some self-service tools for people at level 0 and provide the frontline support and get as much resolved there as possible. And as you mentioned, Willette, you've got a very high first call, first contact resolution at 80%. That's extremely high. And then utilizing the tools that you have in order to keep things close to the customer and to keep the costs as low as possible. So again, that goes back to that return on investment. I'll move on to another question unless somebody has something to add to that. Okay. From your perspective, what are the top 3 metrics that a customer support group should be tracking? Willette, you want to tell us what your top 3 are currently, and I might have something to add.
Well, it's a little bit of a balance there. We also, I didn't mention on here, we also track quality of call, so customer satisfaction. We do a HDI survey for every interaction that hits our desk, and that's part of one of the metrics that we do look at. But our top metrics are the live call answer, the first contact resolution, and average speed of answer. The availability is also something that we track here at the desk. Goes directly to the agent availability and the quality. So we take in every survey and we average out the surveys based on the analyst to find out what their quality is and customer satisfaction. We do calls that we listen to. The senior supervisors will listen to calls every period and evaluate those calls, and we have a quality team that also does call evaluations to make sure that our analysts are following the right script and they're asking the right questions, and they get a score for that. So quality, though didn't mention it here, is something that's big here at our desk. But those biggest KPIs that we're measured on as a group, as a service desk, are live call answer, first contact resolution, availability, and average speed of answer.
Great. Thank you so much. And I think I just pushed that slide out to the audience, the slide that you showed with the KPIs on it, so they can see that as well. And I think some of what you were talking about there will answer a question that came from, let's see who. I think it came from, I'm not seeing it now. Oh, there it is, from James. LCA percent and not AB percent. So live call answer is what you are using, what you're tracking. Correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
And our live call answer does not include anything that's abandoned less than 30 seconds.
Okay. Great.
So just a note there.
Elvin wants to know, is it stated that there's software currently available that allows remote control of iPhones and Macs, or is that something being developed? Peter, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Well, Macs are fully remote controllable right now. I think a majority of the companies that provide remote support technologies can support and remote control a Mac. From an iOS perspective, it's all locked down by Apple. There's no open APIs that allow you to remote control those devices. It's starting to loosen up a little bit, so I believe on the horizon you'll be able to get to remote controlling iPhones and iPads in short order. What that time frame would be, I don't know. It's all controlled by Apple, but the Macs are fully remote controllable today.
Thank you. Jerry asks, is the app that you use custom developed? And I think you did talk about how you developed the custom interface at PepsiCo, if I'm not mistaken, and I will pull that slide up a little bit if I can. There we go. I can pull that up. So you can talk a little bit about how the various elements of that custom interface that you have and how it works again.
Sure. What you see there is we use a standard or vendor software for remote control, but what you see there is an interface that we built. So that's a custom interface that interfaces with several different applications and functionalities to provide the analyst anything that we can do to increase their productivity. So if we've got their most commonly used things in one spot, so they're not having to go out to their remote control tool or having to go out to, ping and all these other things, we built this interface in front of it. But the software sitting behind it is vendor software. And that vendor software, of course, had to go through all of our security protocols and things. So we try very hard not to build a lot of homegrown applications, but we do build a lot of interfaces here at the desk that will help us be more efficient in what we do.
Great. Thanks very much. Lots of questions today. That's absolutely great. I'm glad that we had lots of time here because there are a ton of questions. Can you talk about, this is for you, Willette, Randy wants to know if you need to reboot a connected desktop, how is the reconnect handled?
If we have to reboot a desktop, we don't typically reboot a customer's desktop. We tell the customer to reboot their own desktop. We do reboot servers. But as far as a workstation, we don't typically reboot workstations for customers. We will allow them to reboot because they'll need to close out their applications and things like that. We don't want to get in the middle of that. If they're on the phone with us and if the issue is something that requires a reboot, you can talk them through a restart of their own machine. Now, we do have to sometimes restart our servers. And there is another team that uses remote control really heavily for servers. We use it on some servers, but we don't have access. We here at the desk don't have access to all of the servers that we have in our environment. There's another group that's outside of our desk that heavily uses remote control for server support, and that's our infrastructure operations team. They have access to pretty much every server in our environment, and they would be doing a lot of those restarts and following the right protocols for restarting servers. You can't just go restart a server, right? Depending on what's running it, you're kicking people off, you're stopping jobs. So there's a ton of protocol that has to be followed before restarting any server. For a workstation, we don't restart workstations. We allow the customer to do it.
And then do you normally stay on the phone with them and when the machine reboots, then reconnect with the remote tool? Is that how you work it, or is there another way?
We typically do. No, yeah. We do. For something that's going to be that short of a time, it doesn't take very long to reboot or restart a machine. Typically, we will have the analyst stay on with the customer just so they don't get a different person to have to walk them through whatever was the issue and ensuring that it's been resolved. So we will have them stay on with them. Now, for things like rebuilds, which we do get, we don't stay on the call for a rebuild. That's ours, right? And so what we will typically do in a rebuild scenario is we'll remote control out there, help that customer get their rebuild going, right? And then we disconnect from them. And then they're able to call back once their rebuild is done to proceed with reinstalling applications. We have other productivity tools that we built that are customer-facing so that they can see what applications they had and then go reinstall their applications themselves, right? Because a lot of times you had things on your machine that you forgot you had, didn't know you had. And so we've got some interfaces that our customers are able to get to aid them in certain aspects of troubleshooting and getting their rebuilds done.
Great. And this is a good question for you since you gave some dates on one of the slides that you showed before comparing year to year. When did you start using remote control? Was it 2012 or was it sometime previous to that and you just showed us the 2012, 13, and 14 results?
Yes, I just went back to 2012 because there was a real focus put on remote control at that point. We've used remote control at the desk in some capacity for at least 8 years prior to my time of even joining the desk. But I do know that there were new licenses purchased and a renewed focus placed in 2012 on ensuring the analysts were using it. And that's why I picked the 2012 numbers to kind of show you from there when we really started to focus on what remote control could buy us and implementing it more and using it more. And as, of course, the years go, you see an increase in our metrics. And I think a lot of that is due to remote control. Some things haven't changed. Onboarding new projects, that hasn't changed. Those things that kind of drop in out of the sky, that hasn't changed. The turnover hasn't changed. But being able to focus more on providing or using our remote control functionality to help us get through a lot of this, that has been more of a focus.
Great. Thank you so much for those thorough answers. Thank you, Peter Zenoon, for representing LogMeIn. Our next webinar is a V-Chapter event, which means that only HDI members can attend. If you're an HDI member, please sign up for Code Black. Is your organization ready for anything? With John Maharg, who was present at an F5 tornado event which virtually destroyed the hospital where he works, and he'll talk about how they were able to recover data and get services back up after that event. Thank you so much for attending today's webinar, for filling out our survey, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.